Hi, I'm Addie Betancourt, and welcome to the next episode of Over a Cup of Coffee with Jamie and Addie. We are excited to interview an author today, so stay tuned.
Hey, and welcome back to Over a Cup of Coffee with Jamie and Addie, where two friends sit and talk about everything under the sun, all over a cup of coffee. And we're very excited to be back with you, and we have a great guest today, so I can't wait to get started. So welcome. So Addie.
Yes.
What's up?
I know. It feels like it's been a long time, and I think
does.
it's because we just came out of a holiday weekend, a long weekend, where we were all either busy or relaxing or doing a little bit of both, I hope.
That's right.
Yeah.
It does feel like it's been a long time since we did the last podcast,
Yeah.
but I do want to kind of recap a couple of things because for our audience, both our Facebook audience as well as our listening
Listeners.
audience, our podcast audience, we have a couple of things that we have talked about in previous episodes that I want to go back and share some exciting things about. And one of them goes back to almost episode 2 or 3 where we had Jared and Mark.
Yes.
So Jared Slindy and Mark Fetzer with Guardian Initiative, and they are the two sheriffs, deputies, first responders that are rowing across the Atlantic, and they're rowing 3,000 miles.
Yeah.
And we just had their boat
Intense.
recently,
Yep.
right?
At my hotel. Yeah, we did the startup again of the Focus on Farmington Coffees, where it's a morning networking where we get together with other businesses or new people in the area or neighborhood. And they were our nonprofit that we partnered with for that morning, and they brought the boat out, which was super cool. And we had hotel guests that came out and saw it and were super intrigued. And then we also learned how many meters that 3,000 miles is.
Yes.
And that is
a lot of meters.
a lot.
So we have a challenge for our listening audience, our Facebook audience, our podcast audience, and you can do this no matter where you are.
Yeah.
So these guys are rowing 3,000 miles.
In 45 days,
in-
right?
Yeah, somewhere
something
around
right in there.
around there.
Yeah.
And they're going to leave in December of 2022, and they're going to leave from the coast of
West Africa. I
West
think.
Africa?
Yeah.
The coast of Africa.
Somewhere in Africa.
Geography is not my thing,
No.
but next time I'll be more specific. They're going to row across the Atlantic to Antigua, which I do remember.
That one I know, yeah.
And they are doing this to raise money, awareness, and for first responder mental health.
Right.
Which
Suicide awareness as
Yes.
well.
And I think having come out of a pandemic, we're all very sensitive to what's going on with first responders, but we also just came out of a big hurricane, Hurricane Ida.
Yes.
And everybody, when they want their first responder there, they need them there.
to be there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we're doing a challenge called Home Team Guardian that we came up with that day at the coffee. This is just how we do things. It's like, hey, let's do this.
And I had bought a rowing machine. I had been wanting one. And the day before the coffee, I went online and bought a rowing machine. And then it all kind of fell together. And I was like, well, perfect.
It was perfect, although we still have a few little things to work out. But basically, if you have access to a rowing machine at a gym, or if you have one yourself, we're asking you to do just row 3,000 miles. I mean, it's not that big of a deal on your rowing machine.
Yeah.
And you can do this as a team. So I'm doing it individually, but you could form a team of 10 people or 20 people and just say, we want you to row this far before these guys land in Antigua in 2023.
And to give it a little perspective too, is there's 4 guys in Team Guardian. And so if you break it down by a team of 4 and do those 3,000 miles, then it's not quite as many miles. It's still an enormous amount.
Yes.
But we have a little over a year to get to
do it.
them leaving. Yeah.
So we are coming up with a way for people who are going to take on this challenge to actually donate to Team Guardian Initiative, and we're still working that bit out. So we will have a fundraising page, sort of, if you want to call it a page. We're working the details on that out. And we're just asking everybody who wants to participate to donate. It could be $10. It could be a recurring monthly gift of $20 a month. It could be a one-time donation, but a little bit of buy-in, and also to support their mission, and then start rowing and tracking your meters or your miles. But again, form a team to do it, or a challenge. And so we'll have more about this on our Facebook page, but I just wanted to give a little bit of update on that.
Yeah.
So,
It's exciting.
I know. And I've been rowing. I've only taken a couple breaks. And so anyway, that's one recap. The other thing we wanted just to mention again was the Women's
the
Summit.
Women's Summit. Yeah, Four Corners Professional Women's Summit, October 28th. And it is hybrid. So we would prefer if you're in the region to come in person. But if you're not able to come in person or you're outside of the region, it is open to anyone across the country or even outside of the country if you have access to internet.
That's right. And it's going to be pretty amazing. And
Yes.
so if you're interested in registering either virtually or in person, just you can go to the Chamber website. There's a link right there. And that is www.gofarmington.com, and just click on Professional Women's Summit and we'll take you right to the registration page. And again, I think we have a variety of speakers that will appeal to
Just about
audiences
anyone.
wherever you are. And we are very excited about this year's summit. And one of our guests is actually an author named Christina Erdezek. And she has written a book that she's published, which brings me to today's guest, who is not Christina Erdezek, but who, however, is a published author. So finally, Sherri, now here you are. We've done our little recap, and we want to introduce you today as our very special guest, Sherri Maret, and you are a children's author.
Yes, my first book came out in 2017, but before that, I was actually a teacher librarian for 20 years, and it's quite a change in career, but I'm really enjoying it so far.
Well, we sure welcome you to today's podcast.
Yeah, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
So, can you give us a little bit of your maybe a little bit of your history with Farmington? And again, for our listeners, we're in Farmington, New Mexico, which is in the Four Corners. And so can you give us a little bit of your tie-in with Farmington?
Sure. I moved to Farmington and went to Tibbetts in 9th grade and graduated in 1981. Go Scorpions. And I had some amazing teachers at Farmington High School, Mrs. Englehart and Mrs. Bell, who I'm Facebook friends with. And Mrs. Lemon was an English teacher that was amazing. And so was Mrs. Mason. And I loved reading, loved books, and they were all instrumental in, I think, helping me along the way. Mrs. Bell was a typing teacher, a business teacher, and she was so supportive. But as a teacher, author, she taught me how to type, which is an amazing thing to know how to do, quickly. So I have a lot of fond memories of the teachers at Farmington High School.
Oh, that's great. And we see behind you, our Facebook audience can see behind you all the books that you have published. Our podcast audience also, obviously they can follow you on Facebook or through your website. But you have behind you, I think it looks like 8 or 9 published books. Is that right?
This is my granddaughter's bookcase, and 4 of them are mine, and the other 4 are other. Yes.
Okay.
They're all not mine. I wish. I'm working on it.
Well, we're excited to have you here today, and I brought in a few of your books, and I thought maybe we could talk about them a little bit. But I think being a children's author, I mean, you open up the imagination to children. Adults, I mean, we read a lot of, I fiction.
I read constantly,
Yeah, you're more of a nonfiction
Right.
reader. But adults tend to be more critical, like, that couldn't happen. Whereas children, can you speak to that a little bit?
Sure. I did start writing for children when I went from a high school librarian position to a K-3 librarian position. I was kind of out of my element, but I did start writing short plays and one book that is hopefully going to be out someday that ended up being a second in a series. But I was writing for them because it was so interesting to interact with kindergarten through 3rd grade after being immersed in the big research process. And so they do have an awesome imagination. And I loved to make them excited about reading, excited about, writing their own stories. So it brings me a lot of joy, but I actually do a lot of homework. So when you talked about reading nonfiction and fiction, I usually have 20 to 30 picture books at home with me because I'm constantly like seeing what other artists, illustrators, authors are doing, because it's an amazing world, the children's literature. Yeah. So it's been a great adventure so far, for sure.
That's really neat. I really like in the book that you have on the top. My brain, of course, just shut off on me. The book of Untold Stories. Mm-hmm. That one, I like how you, on your website, I noticed that you have the option for teachers or homeschool parents to go and do some extra work with that book. And I was telling Jamie before we got started, my brother's homeschooling my niece and nephew now, and they're 11 and 6. And they're very creative art family, and I was thinking I'm going to order all of your books for them, but that one in particular, I'm excited to see where they take their stories together.
It is so interesting. I have been doing writing workshops via Zoom. I'm hoping that I'll be doing some in person. Mm-hmm. And the program I did in I think it was January, February, it was without the actual book. The book was in the process of being put together. So I got to use maybe 4 of the illustrations and talk about it. Mm-hmm. But the kids came up with the craziest stories and that not in a million years could I have come up with. Yeah. So that's where I just love that kids are so free to be imaginative and creative. Yeah. And the sky is, the sky isn't the limit, because they will go past it. So I don't know if you, my favorite illustration point in the book of Untold Stories is the one with the dog and the paw over his face, and there's a little alien flying by.
Oh, yeah.
And that one, it really resonated with a lot of the kids because they liked that coming up with the story. Yeah.
This is, I don't know, for our Facebook audience, this is the illustration that she's talking about. And I actually used this book, or actually all 3 of your books yesterday. My husband and I have grandchildren that live in North Carolina, so we try to, Facebook or FaceTime with them at least a couple times a week. And our grandson is just 3 years old. But yesterday I got these books and held them in front of the camera, and even at 3, just going through the pages and asking him, what do you see? What picture do you see? And he was so funny. There's in your book of Untold Stories, there's one picture of 2 girls. They're standing on the beach in the sand. And I asked him, I said, what do you see in this picture? Where are these girls? And what he noticed was their toes. He said they have toes. And he didn't notice anything else but that they had toes because they weren't wearing any shoes. And he latched right onto that. And I thought it was so fun. So kids, their imaginations, and even at the young age of 3, you can use these books to just have them identify pictures. We used Layla and the butterflies to talk about the butterflies and to count how many butterflies. So I think parents, can use these books as tools and conversation starters for sure. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I do have to mention the illustrator is Thomas Hilly, and the way of putting this book together was really interesting. I had the idea because I saw that I had elementary writers, in the making. And I wanted to give them the opportunity to write. And so this has been percolating in my head for quite a while. And it's just incredible that I could come up with the ideas of what to talk about and how to help them along the writing process. But I also came up with the prompts, the illustrative prompts. Mm-hmm. So I would say, I need you to come up with an illustration, and I would describe it, and then he would bring it to life. And I was like, oh goodness, no wonder I'm not an illustrator, because mine would be stick figures. So he definitely brought every illustration to life beyond my expectations. And I love that it's also multicultural, because I think all children should see themselves in literature.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I really like that. I like that going onto your website and reading about you. I like how you traced your Indigenous background and the different family members that you're connected to, and how long you spent in your life not knowing that, and how many of us have. those kind of roots, and we don't necessarily seek them out, but having that combination in your stories, I think is really neat, because we do get sometimes just going and forget that, oh wait, we came from, who did we come from? My family's Hispanic, and you can't tell that by looking at us, because we don't necessarily look like what people think of Hispanic, because we're not dark brown, and we don't have dark brown hair, and we're all blonde and blue-eyed.
Well, and so the Cloud Artist is a really perfect example of that, because that is a Choctaw story. Is that correct?
Well, it's an original story, but it's in Choctaw and English.
Okay.
And so in Choctaw, the Cloud Artist is Hoshanti Hobatabal Inch Only. So this came out in 2017. I dreamt the whole story. It was the most powerful dream I've had. I wrote it, and within 6 months, it was under.
Wow. And this is one, I think you froze just a bit. So we're going to try to, there you go, you're back.
Okay. So should I just start over?
No, just keep going. You said you had a dream, and then you wrote the book.
Yes. So I had a dream and the story came to me. I wrote the book. It came out it was under contract in about 6 months, and then it came out the following year. And Roadrunner Press, who specializes in Native American voices and Southwest voices, she paired me with an illustrator, Marisha Sequoia Clark, and the translator, Dora Wixon. And they were all members of the Choctaw Nation. And a month before the book came out, I found out Marisha and I were distant cousins.
Oh, my goodness.
So that was wild. I haven't met her. She lives in California. I met her in person. But it was just a really good start to an incredibly powerful journey. So this is actually at the Smithsonian Library now. So that was
that's really cool,
exciting for me. It then sold at a few museums. So this is probably my most successful book so far, and it's got a special place in my heart because it is based on like my Choctaw heritage. There's a lot of historical references in it because a lot of people don't know much about the Choctaws. They started out in Mississippi and were moved on the Trail of Tears to Oklahoma. So it's a fantasy tale, but it's got historical references in it.
Well, I loved it. And I thought about every child and adults, actually. I know some adults spend a lot of times looking at clouds in the sky and coming up with pictures. So that idea of, painting the clouds or the pictures in the sky with the clouds, but every child loves to look to see what you can find. And it's a game we all learn to play when we're children. What do you see in the clouds?
Yeah. When I drive home, I always look at the clouds as I'm driving home, and I'm like, oh, look at what that one looks like.
Yeah, so even though a child might not be able to, paint it across the sky in their imagination, they can. And that's what I loved about it. And I thought having it translated in the book as well, so it's in English and was just wonderful. And the illustrations. So what a wonderful accomplishment.
Yeah.
It was the start, of being able to do this full time. And that's what I've wanted to do. I retired early from teaching to do this because to become a full-time working children's book author, you have to put everything into it. And there's a lot of research involved. I get asked, so how do you get published? A lot. And so on my website, I don't know if you saw it, but I have a blog post about like first steps of getting traditionally published. I'm very fortunate. I think I got very lucky because I know that there are other authors out there who have better stories than me. But I was at the right place at the right time. So I publish with 2 different publishing houses. They're small. I represent myself, so I don't have an agent yet. I'm working on that. So Roadrunner Press was the one that gave me my start. And Muddy Boots is responsible for Layla and the Butterflies. That one was co-written with my husband, Tim Merritt. He is a biologist. And I have another book coming out with Muddy Boots in August. So I'm really excited about that one too.
So Sherri, can you give us real quick your website? I just don't want to forget. I mean, I'm sure we'll post a link to it on our Facebook page, but just so the podcast listeners can go to your website as well.
Oh, sure. It's just my name, Sherri Maret, and it's SherriMaret. And so on my website, I do have a lot of the educational activities because I taught for so long. And it was so frustrating for me to like pick up a book and then I'd have to create activities to go with it. So instead of having the teachers do all the work, I did it for them. So
Yes.
I think there's 75 to 80 activities now.
Yeah, there were quite a
all
few.
the different, yeah.
I looked through most of them. Yeah, I think it's really neat. Well, I was very intrigued because like it's my brother's homeschooling for the first time, and I want to help him as much as possible do this and help the kids be successful. And they're outside of Austin, Texas, so we have distance is an issue, but with the ability to do all of these things virtually, I want to be able to help him and even maybe give him some breaks if I can. And so like your website was so perfect because me and the kids could actually get on together and I could walk them through some things. And maybe it's a time when my brother does something with his graphic art or my sister-in-law is doing something with her sewing business, and the kids can be handled for a little while by me virtually. And I just it was like a big treasure chest for me when I went to the website and saw that. I was like, oh my goodness, I can be involved.
It's nice that you mentioned Austin. My sister lives there.
Oh,
and,
really?
I was born and raised in Texas. I moved from Pearland.
I know where that is.
Outside of Houston.
Yeah.
That's where I was from when I moved
Okay.
to Farmington. And one of my first days at school, I was kind of made fun of because I had that Southern twang
accent.
that I get every time I go home because interacting with my relatives, and then I come back and I have it again, but I've lost it. But I was hoping to be at the Texas Book Fest. I was at the Oklahoma Book Fest in 2019. But it's very competitive to get in, but I'm fingers crossed that I'll be there next year.
Well, I'm just going to put a little bug out there now for 2022 for our Professional Women's Summit, which we are going, this year's our third summit, but we are planning to continue this, and we're always looking for really interesting speakers. So I'll probably be hitting you up to come back to Farmington.
Yes.
And I think you'll be interested. They're doing a big project where Tibbetts used to be. The school itself, they did tear down the school, so I'm sorry to say that, but
they did build a new one though on the west side of town.
Yes,
but
it's not in the location you would remember it, but there's a big park area where the track was and that whole area, and they're turning it into an all abilities park for the whole community, for people of all abilities. So whether there's some special needs or physical limitations, the park will be called an all abilities park, and I think that's a really wonderful thing to use the space for.
That is wonderful news.
Yeah, Farmington is really behind that effort, the city of Farmington, and I think it's going to be wonderful for not just children, but elderly people too.
Everybody, people of all ages and abilities.
Right. So I'll definitely be in touch about next year's
I know.
summit.
I was already thinking. I was like, it'd be so fun.
Sherri, I wanted to say, because I still have every illustrated children's book from when I was little, from the Golden Egg Easter book to all of my Little House on the Prairie books, which are they're almost falling apart. I've read them so much. And I homeschooled my kids all the way from preschool all the way until they went to college. And I used books as the foundation of their entire education. And I used a method called unit studies, which is where I would have, for example, taken Layla and the Butterfly and read it every day for a week. And every day we would have done a different project based around the book. And this is a wonderful book to use for a unit study. But I really think that books, children's books, young adult fiction and things can be used to educate. And I always told my kids, once you learn to read, we're going to just focus on reading, because once you learn to read, the world is open to you. You then have the power to learn about everything that you want, to explore anything you want. So reading was always the cornerstone of everything we did in homeschooling. And I think you as a librarian could understand that, and as a children's book author.
Absolutely. And there is a theme to my books, like The Cloud Artist, and you probably picked up on it, is, to be true to yourself. She was put in a situation, and then she had to figure out like how she was going to deal with it. And I just think kids need to have those messages to, dream your dream, dream big, go after your dream, be true to yourself. And then Layla and the Butterflies was kind of a totally different book, because there's an odd story behind this. My husband, who is a biology professor at Shippensburg University in Pennsylvania, he decided to write a kid's book over our Christmas break. And so I was like, okay, go ahead. And I was like, this is pretty good, And he said, well, I thought you might be my co-author. And I'm like, yeah, because it's not really written for kids. Yeah, it's supposed to be a kid's book. So I partnered with him as my co-author, rewrote it, and boy, working with your husband on a writing project was very interesting. There was a lot of arguments, but it was, and it was fun too. But his brain is very scientific and mine is very creative, and so it was a labor of love. But I think we're just always seem to be at the right place at the right time, because I pitched the book, and within like 2 months of us finishing up the final edit, it was picked up at Muddy Boots.
Wow.
And those are, I have people I know that tried for 15 years. So I just think I just am like in the right place at the right time. But he has a sequel, and I'm like, well, wait, let's just wait to see how Layla does. And, we have to there's things that happen in the publishing business where they want to see how your books perform before they for other ones. So it's doing pretty well. But I'm going to be talking about like the Monarch, the journey from north to south to Mexico,
how cool.
A museum next month, and working with kids at a little a museum for kids. And I think I might have, we haven't talked about this yet. So Layla and the Butterflies is kind of based on our passion. We have 50 acres in Pennsylvania. About 45 is in a conservation easement for wildlife, with an emphasis on pollinators. So we started adding more and more host plants for butterflies. And of course, the bees are happy too, because they use the same plants for pollination and food and nectar and all that. But we have over 400 milkweed plants.
Wow.
Yeah, it's crazy. So it's just a joy to see the butterflies coming and the caterpillars there. And then we have chrysalises, they're emerging. And then we'll get the butterflies coming south. And so we had planted a goldenrod field just for them. So we kind of pamper the butterflies and hope they enjoy passing through. But sometimes we've seen, 25 to 40 at a time during the migration part. So it's near and dear to our heart.
I love that.
That's really cool.
Well, and that's
I'm
just
going to Pennsylvania.
Yeah, you're going to Pennsylvania. That's just an example, though, of how a children's book, you can use it to teach everything from colors to the little preschoolers all the way to science and the migration. And it's just how a book can be used, especially in a homeschooling, or a classroom setting, and to really use a book and launch a number of projects that can be adapted to different ages. So we're getting kind of close to the end of our 30 minutes, and we always try to keep it to over the time it would take to drink a cup of coffee with a friend. But I would certainly want to point out and give a shout out to our local independent book stores, because I actually found out about you through a Facebook post from an independent seller here in Farmington, which is Amy's Bookcase. And Amy's bookcase is located here in Farmington, New Mexico. And I always really like to try to get people to go to their independent, locally owned bookstores to find. And Amy does carry a number of your books that, in fact, I bought 2 of them there. So, and many of these bookstores can order books for you as well. But I really feel like we need to support those local bookstores and go to them first if you want to get some. But if they can't get it through their local bookstore, where can they find your books?
You can order them through Barnes & Noble or Amazon or Bookshop, which is an online website, book, kind of a large book vendor that's different than Amazon and Barnes & Noble. But Amy, from Amy's Bookcase, we graduated together.
Okay.
I didn't know if you knew that, but yes, Amy has been a friend since high school.
Oh, that's great.
That's awesome.
That's great.
And
well, again,
that's what we do. We support our friends.
That's right. We support our community. And thank you so much, Sherri. This has been absolutely,
I love it.
I know. I have really enjoyed it. And we both appreciate so much you giving your time and being part of this podcast that you didn't even know existed. Being so willing.
Crazy women in Farmington reaching out to you for all these years.
But we look forward to seeing more books and hearing maybe the sequel of some of these. And again, thank you so much for these beautiful books and the stories. And we're looking forward to sharing all the information with our Facebook and our podcast audience.
Yeah.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thank you, Sherri.
Thank you all so much for joining us for this episode of Over a Cup of Coffee with Jamie and Addie. And just remember, wherever you are, you can build positive community and make your place a better place to live. Bye.